You've eaten Gotham's wealth, its spirit, but your feast is nearly over.
This is not my home. It's an operating table. And I'm the surgeon. Why aren't you laughing?
From this moment on, none of you are safe.
Welcome to the Batman Book Club, a podcast exploring the Dark Knight Library. I'm your host, Ryan Lauer. The Batman Book Club is a proud member of the Batman Podcast Network, hosted by Batman on Film. Just go to batmanonfilm.com, click on podcasts, and you'll find the Batman Podcast Network that has a whole list of other Bat-related shows that also like to dive into other nerdy subjects that we all of us, including our favorite Italian, Peter Vera, love to frolic about in our free time. Peter's a frolicker. Don't let him tell you any different. Batman Book Club is also on Patreon if you like what's going on with the show and you want to help support the show and keep those generators running in the Wayne Manor study. Just go to patreon.com/thebatmanbc. Now, thank you for listening to episode 162, Batman and the Mad Monk, making his, I think this is probably just like his annual return to the show. Once a year, it's a big monumental experience. People pre-sales for this episode are through the roof, because this guy is coming back. It's a familiar voice. It's one Sir Micah Ramey. Hello, Micah. Welcome back.
Hello, Mr. Lauer. Thank you for having me. Are we sure that Pete Vera is our favorite Italian? Are we positive about that?
He's a proprietor.
I don't know. Whenever I met
favorite.
his brother at the Batman watch party, I don't know. Right. I might lean a little more heavily to Michael.
Mikey is a gem. He is just a big, lovable bear, and he also has a big passion for Lego and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. So already both of those things put him above Pete. So, let me scratch that then. Our favorite Italian is Mikey. I guess our second favorite is the frolicker, Peter Vera.
Yeah,
so,
I would agree to that.
Okay, There we go. I'm glad. Thank you for coming on here, and we got that sorted out. Next wrap-up episode with Pete, I'm going to make sure to say that. I'll be like, our second favorite Italian, second only to his brother, who is a gem of New Jersey. So, yeah, this is, I looked, and it has been over a year and 49 episodes since you've been on last. Sorry about that.
No, I that is not your fault at all. I am sorry about that. I have been very busy the last 6 months, to say the least. Even really in the last year, just getting out of the military, figuring out life, moving to Dallas. A lot of things keeping me busy and away from appearing on the Batman Book Club.
From stuff that really matters, like Batman comic books.
Exactly. But man, you have so many great people on the show that, not having me on the show for a year, it can wait. It's just fun.
Not personal. It's not personal. I swear. As Jay Yaws, the wise Jay Yaws tells me many times, it's a good problem to have. So I'm very fortunate that I have a nice list of people who like to come on the show and agree to come on the show and enjoy Batman comics like we do. So I'm just glad that we were able to get you back, because we knew, because your last episode, if anybody wants to, before diving into this one or afterward, you want to check this one out, was episode 113, dropped in July of 2022. I think it was the episode after the Kelly Jones one. So you had a lot to live up to. Yeah. And you exceeded. But we talked the book that comes before this one, Batman and the Monster Men. So I didn't re-listen to that. I kind of wanted to, but I ran out of time just to make sure that I don't, because this book's so related to that one, that I don't say the same things or contradict myself, but then thought, you know what, that might be half the fun.
Yeah. If you invest too much into it, then you overthink.
There you go.
You're kind of not naturally and organically yourself. So I think sometimes it's best to do no research or anything like that, but less than you probably would. Don't overthink it.
There's some, I can't think of which sitcom it is. It's some show where it emphasizes, I cannot overstate how little thought I put into this. And yeah, there we go. I am not going to overthink this. All right. Well,
like The Office to me.
I feel like it has to be, but I don't know. So, anyways, it's out there. Somebody figure it out. Anyways, let's get to talking about the big kahuna, the reason for this gathering, Michael. Let's talk Batman and the Mad Monk. Now, this was a 6-issue series released in 2006 and 2007, written and illustrated by one Sir Matt Wagner, part of the Dark Moon Rising line that he had, which we can get into that here in just a second. It was released, issues were released physically, they were collected in a trade paperback, and then surprisingly, it kind of didn't have more releases, and it's not available digitally. It was collected in 2020 for a release, Legends of the Dark Knight Matt Wagner hardcover, which I bought that right up because it's a great collection that I highly recommend. I think it's still available. That is available on my favorite app of all time, Hoopla, and it's also available on DC Universe Infinite Ultra. So if you're having trouble tracking it down, I think that's the way to go, unless you want to hit the back issue bins and pay a little bit extra. But I just thought that was pretty surprising that this, like Batman and the Monster Men, of not as easy to track down. So for this episode, which version did you read, Micah? Hell yeah.
And for our audio listeners out there, I'm sure this isn't a video, Craig, just
Correct.
a podcast, right? So reading the paperback, I believe this is the original. It's actually signed by Matt Wagner. It's not to me, it's to the other BOF son, Jake, who gets forgotten about sometimes. It's not just me.
Well, he doesn't come on podcasts. Come on, Jake.
I know. He needs to get on here. It's just me carrying the burdens of our fathers. But I think in the last episode I did mention I didn't have it at the time because I was living in Maryland. So I read it digitally. The Monster Man. Sorry.
Yeah.
So I think I mentioned it on that one, but Matt Wagner signed and autographed Monster Man for me, and then Mad Monk for Jake. So
nice.
It's just a really cool thing for us that we have both of these.
Yeah.
And then also just to show you that.
Yeah, I was gonna say, let me see
there's all kinds of things. Here's the original Monster Man, and it's signed by Matt Wagner there at the bottom, as you can see.
Nice.
And
good for him. His signature is legible.
Very legible.
Good for him. Thank you, Matt
My
Wagner.
signature is not. You should not, dude. People, my signature is terrible, dude. I'll show you my driver's license. It's bad.
Mine's mine's legible. But again, some of the signatures I've gotten, it is like, if I ever get to a point where I'm going to sell this, are they really going to believe that this was signed by this person? Because it just looks like a wave and that's it. But
yeah,
I don't know. I actually, so I have the trades that you just showed me.
Okay.
And I do have the hardcover Legends of the Dark Knight collection, but I was not able to go and get that out of storage in time. So I had to check out that collection via Hoopla. So I went digital on this. Pete would be very disappointed in me, but digital is very convenient, and Hoopla is such a wonderful app that I use it. It is there when I need it. But I would have loved to have been able to grab one of my physical, because when I can, I'd rather read physical.
Absolutely.
Now, do you remember when the first time you read this was?
First time I read this is when it came out. So, and I believe it was 2006, correct?
Yeah.
Correct me if I'm wrong about that.
Yeah. Looking it up, it went 2006, 2007. So, over 6 months. Yeah, then. But
which may have been too early for me. I was 9 at the time.
Okay.
And I remember reading each issue. Whenever I would go and stay with my dad, Bill Ramey, he'd have each issue as they would come out. So I read it over a year at a time.
He has the original issues. Good for him.
And I think it partly has to, this would make sense. Partly with me liking Monster Man and this one so much is probably why he got Matt Wagner to sign him. Eventually, I have to ask him about that, but that sounds familiar to me.
When did you get him signed?
I don't know exactly. It was probably, I would assume, within around that time.
Okay.
This is the last work Matt Wagner's done, really, since that time, or what else has he done?
He did Batman number 54 of the Tom King run. And let me look I'm looking here, pulling it up on. Yeah,
I was
Batman number
surprised it wasn't
54.
as
And
expansive as I would want it to be. It's
I
pretty
believe
brief.
he had a falling out with DC.
Mm.
And I believe he was vocal. I mean, he was what do you want to say? It wasn't like he was kind of professional about it, but it seemed like his post, what he'd said about it, and I apologize if I'm getting some of the details mixed up, but I swear it was on his Twitter or it was Instagram, but it was after that Batman 54 came out. There was a disagreement with DC, and he was pretty open about the problem with it, but I think there was supposed to be more work from him and his son, like working together on Batman books, and then that, because of their disagreement, it just kind of ended, which is too bad, because that issue number 54 is a really good standalone issue, and it's a focus on, Batman and Dick Grayson's, or Bruce and Dick Grayson, and I highly recommend somebody reading it, but that's just too bad. And then obviously with this, that we'll get into, both books left me wanting more, Monsterman and Mad Monk. And so, Monsterman, I did get more in the Mad Monk. And then when that was over, it was like, oh man, I want more. So yeah, when I first read this though, it was when I got the trades. It would have had to have been maybe like 2008, 2009. So this is what's really funny is, spoiler alert on this book. I love this book. This is also almost like an original member of the Bat Shelf. And what I mean by that is I can kind of picture when I had just like a Bat Shelf, like one shelf on my bookcase that was Batman trades. And if you know that, then that means it's limited to like maybe 10, maybe 10 stories. And those were my first trades. And I think both of these were part of that.
Wow.
And then I got a real job and spent some college money on a ton of, and then that just turned into Bat shelves, Bat bookcases
library
and stuff. Yeah, exactly. But this was almost like a sort of like a founding member. So that's why I think I have it. It's not nostalgia, but it is like a love of, oh, this one's a little bit special than a lot of others because I've had this one for so long. It's, it not one of my first, but in that, part of that first group. So, there you go.
I mean, you said nostalgia, and you said it's not necessarily, you don't really feel that for you. It absolutely is for me.
It is for you, yeah. Because I feel like nostalgia it leans more toward childhood. That's nostalgia.
Exactly.
Batman 89, Returns Forever. That's all nostalgia for me. Dark Knight Trilogy is not nostalgia because I was an adult then. For you at like 9 years old and stuff reading this, I think absolutely that makes sense of it. Yeah, this story's been there for you as you were developing and reading and stuff like that. This is nostalgia for you. And that's great.
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of why the Batman hits so hard for me as a film, because this is the Batman I love. This interpretation of Batman is by far what I prefer. Batman by himself, kind of in his early years where he makes mistakes. He's not necessarily perfect. He is human.
Yeah.
Which is my favorite thing about Batman, and what draws me to him is that he is just human.
And atmospheric.
And very atmospheric, and the art, the art itself is my favorite thing about the book. I'm sure we'll get into talk about that later. But just to touch on it now, it's the artwork and the covers is Matt Wagner is exceptional. I would love to just get him back just to do the art. And I think his story writing is great, but I mean the art, it's phenomenal.
Well, lastly, and this is the easiest question of these beginning ones for you, is why Mad Monk?
Why Mad Monk? Well, obviously we had to continue the Dark Moon Rising series, and somehow no one picked Monsterman. Somehow no one picked Mad Monk. And even when we did Ego, which is my first appearance on the show, I was really surprised that no one had chosen that one either. So
it took. I'm like going to talk slowly while I slowly get to my point and what I was going to say. It took 84 episodes for someone to choose Dark Knight Returns. That was a little mind-blowing to me, you know?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, yeah, I was a little surprised too, and especially, but then I also know I have a skewed view with the Dark Moon Rising books of I think that they're wonderful because I have that attachment to them. I was like, okay, maybe they're not at the top of other people's lists. That's fine. And then you chose it, and it did seem like it's a package deal to where when we could figure it out that it worked for you to come back, that you would just do Mad Monk as well, as long as you wanted to, because you're the guest. So if you don't want to do it, then you don't have to do it. So a little, not much background on this, but it's interesting. One, that this is part of a Dark Moon Rising that was written and illustrated by the same guy, one Sir Matt Wagner. Yet both books are listed as issue 1 through 6, which is kind of interesting to me, but also not a bad idea, I think, on like from a marketing standpoint of if you're coming in on issue, the second issue of this and it's marked 8 instead of 2, it's almost like I'll just wait. Like I can't go get like backtrack and get 8 previous, but it's instead Mad Monk issue number 2. It's like, oh, well, give me issue 1 quick. And so I don't think that's a bad idea. I was just only surprised that it ended with Mad Monk and nothing else became of it. I have no clue if that was always the plan, if something happened or anything like that. But both stories, the point of this Dark Moon Rising was taking stories from the Golden Age and not making them contemporary, but almost like updating them and making them fit more with like the now in comics. And so this actual story was called Batman versus the Vampire. And it was Detective Comics number 31 and 32 from 1939. Update Matt Wagner surely did to that story, but also those, I mean, it says those 2 issues, but those were Detective Comics where it was, I think even the cover for number 31, Detective 31, is 64 pages of action. The first part of this Batman story is like 11 pages, and there's not a ton of dialogue in it either. So I would recommend, because it is fun, and I did do it myself, to go back and read 31 and 32, just the little Batman parts, to compare and contrast to this Mad Monk story. Spoiler alert, this one is much more enjoyable than that one is. If nobody's read that, but it is fun, and it's cool to see what Wagner took from it and improved upon or included here. And he didn't do anything like, I'm gonna totally spin this, or anything either. Like the elements are there, it just they're more fleshed out. So have you read those?
No, I just read like synopsis of them just to get a feel. And dude, the synopsis story of Detective Comics 31 with the vampires, hilarious. Batman fighting gorillas, Batman, and there's a lot of elements in there that that Matt Wagner brought over, even story components and obviously characters. I mean, it's all, I think, really organically brought into the modern day, even though I mean these books are almost 20 years old, which feels
wild.
But even now reading them, it feels like, I mean, it feels like it was originally written. It doesn't really feel like an adaptation to me. But looking back at it is interesting. And those original stories are hilarious. But I mean, Bill Finger's artwork is amazing. That cover of Detective Comics 31 is amazing, dude. It is beautiful. It's so beautiful.
Like too many, masterpiece, cinema, iconic. Those are 2 adjectives that can go to the wayside at this point because they're overused.
Exactly.
But we need to find a new one, because it may be influential is the word for that cover. Just for Batman alone, that cover has been not exactly, would I say, redone, but has inspired so many Batman covers. And that original cover is, like you just said, it is awesome. Flat out freaking awesome. Wagner himself, though, took it and put his spin on it. And I think it's definitely one of my top 5 Batman covers of all time. The thousands of Batman covers that have been done, that is easily in my top 5. It is so freaking perfect.
Yes.
I love it
I
so
think
much.
all the covers,
All the
that one
covers.
specifically is probably the best one, but there's so many covers in here that are just,
Yeah.
to me, iconic. I mean, I read it when I was so young and it formed in my mind at an early age, but I just think each issue, I was excited just to get to the next issue to see the cover again.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know this.
It's just beautiful work.
I don't know this style because it's not like, I'm not an artist. So I don't know. I don't think it's watercolor, but it's something like maybe a cousin of that, slightly related, because it doesn't match the art on the inside, but it obviously doesn't deviate too far away from it either.
Yeah.
And that was always something that would bug me with comics, is what I see on the front is not matching on the inside. Then I'm like, well, no, it's like you promised me that, and I didn't get that. This I didn't have that feeling with this at all. Because I do like just the look of however he, like, whatever that Wagner touch is that he did to each cover, I think is awesome. And I know that was apparent in the Monster Men story too. He did all the covers for that, which were really cool. But going to that very, for the cover for issue 1, inspired by Detective 31, it's so, like, we already said, atmospheric, sort of gothic, moody. Yeah, that's what I want in my freaking Batman art, is like those 3 things, because it creates such an awesome mood. And I'm like, yeah, that is, oh my God, that's Batman's area to me.
Absolutely.
So I can't say enough good things about that cover, because I love that cover so much.
It's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, that about does it for this episode. So Micah, thanks for coming back on. we've peaked on this story. So I think an interesting part, and we can scatter all over the place. We'll spoil the hell out of this book because it's this old. We always talk, we talk about everything for stories on these episodes, but I think an interesting starting point for this is finding its timeline, and that Wagner did his research to where I don't think this story is supposed to take place post year 1, pre the Long Halloween. And he does such a good job picking points to focus on so that you know where this time period, like where the story fits in, but doesn't contradict anything. But there's like a little bit of zoning in where it, where I have to like pause and think, okay, hold on a second. Because at the end of year 1, Gordon says about, basically is teasing the Joker. At the end of this story, Batman's teasing the Joker. So then it is thinking, like, trying to place, okay, somewhere between after Batman saves baby Gordon in year 1, then this Dark Moon Rising happens, and then ends for that last monologue with Gordon in year 1, maybe. So
yeah, it doesn't perfectly fit,
exactly,
but it does. It subtly lets you know kind of where it is in the timeline. After year 1, Gordon's a captain. I mean, Harvey Dent's very brief in this book, but his relationship with Batman is still fairly new. So it kind of starts building those pieces. And then I guess we'll just spoil the end with a mention, like you talked about, with him going to deal with the Joker, which I know leads into The Man Who Laughs. So I don't know if that's intentionally what this ending was meant to be.
Yeah.
And it's weird to me that Matt Wagner didn't kind of do that one as well and kind of have a trilogy together. It seems kind of strange to me because I know it directly leads into that. But I mean, this is my favorite version of Batman. Like I mentioned earlier, I love young Batman still learning things. And even after year 1, you can still tell that he's new. And as much as we love year 1 and Long Halloween, I think it's really cool to get these middle stories in between that. Because it kind of, in the Long Halloween, to me, Batman's kind of fully formed at that point.
I don't think I've ever said on here that I love the Long Halloween, but yeah, I love the Long Halloween. Carry on. Just want to make that clear for you, Paul Hunter.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. And I think it's interesting to get, these stories that are in between of year 1 and Long Halloween Batman, where he's settled in of what he needs to do, but he's still not fully formed yet. And bringing back, I mean, this is the perfect way to bring back old stories where it was Batman just starting out existing. So it makes sense to take those from 1939 and bring them into the modern day.
I think that's the appeal for when writers decide they want to go earlier with Batman, because they can just give him more depth, because he's not, I mean, Batman's never perfect, but there are stories where it's status quo Batman, where it's like, oh yeah, he's got a plan C for plan D, like everything's mapped out and he is perfect right now. So there's just more to chew on with the earlier years. So there are, like, that does add for good storytelling and good dramatic moments, like in this, of as he's figuring it out. And he does have those moments where it's the Batman we know. And it's like, yeah, he can beat the hell out of these criminals and, scare the hell out of them and stuff like that. But then you see that not all of GCPD is with Gordon, and there's still some crooked cops there that Batman takes care of, as well as on the flip side of that, Gordon's trying to clear some out. And one's like, hey, we know what you're doing, and not all of us are against it. So you get what you need. And so he's building allies. And so, and then as you see, as Batman's trying to, playing detective here, he excels at it, but then he doesn't think about his next move. And then he does get damaged, beaten up, or not beaten up, but falls into a trap and gets injured like bad a few times in this story, which is also good to see. And also, makes us root for our hero Batman, because even though he's just went through hell and he's still getting up, and it's just like, I'll just wrap my leg, but I got to keep going, sort of deal too, which is also like, that's a different angle to come at. Let's display him being a hero and fighting, let's building him up and rooting for him and stuff. And I think like Wagner, who I know he's written a lot, but I think a lot of people with Matt Wagner, they associate his art, and it's like, oh, this is a great demonstration of, like, he's a really good writer too, develops really good stories. And I know he's got Grendel and stuff like that he's created too, but I do think the impression, like, first off is, oh, Matt Wagner's art. And this is great evidence of, like, he's just a good storyteller overall.
Yeah, and I think that's why we talked about the art. As soon as we started talking about it, we got into the art very fast.
Well, yeah, of course.
Because it's impossible not to. It's very eye-catching. It's iconic. It's memorable. But I like how you talked about, I mean, I mentioned it too, which is how subtly Wagner introduces where this is in the timeline with Gordon and how the cops are treating him initially on the rooftop, where they're they're still in someone else's pocket and they don't like him interacting with Batman, and then Batman shows up. And what I do like is this almost feels like it's the reader's interpretation of Batman as well, where Batman is kind of impervious in a way to making mistakes. But whenever he shows up on GCPD's rooftop, and Gordon sees him hurt, which he mentions earlier that, I've never seen him in action before, and he's just completely shocked at how proficient he is as a fighter. But then when he comes back after being seriously injured and he's bleeding all over the place, Gordon is incredibly aghast at how much he's injured, and Batman's just kind of playing it off like nothing's wrong.
I'm fine. It just closes his cape too.
Yeah.
And it kind of turns away from him, which is another, like, not trying to, I don't know. I mean, we expect that out of Bruce and Batman, the stubborn. I'm not trying to draw attention on what, like, let's get going. What's the problem? What do we got to do?
Yeah.
Sort of deal. So what you mentioned too, of almost like an awe, is when they go to the morgue, and the mortician there is even, he's Gordon helped him out. So this guy, I forget his name. I mean, he's not a major character or anything like that. And, allows Gordon in to look at the bodies that they found with the puncture wounds on their necks. And then when you see the panel, which I love too, of Gordon and then like Batman behind him, and you see the face change of the mortician too, where he's just like, oh. And that instantly made me, now that this is the first time I probably read this last year right after we did Monster Men, because it is just like a package deal. But this time around, at least, that instantly made me think of the scene in The Batman at the beginning when they go to when Gordon's leading Batman in, and they're like all the detectives are just like looking at him like, oh, like sort of deal. I'm like, that's a cool thing. I don't know. I don't. The comfortable presence of Batman, I think, should not exist, except from Gordon and Dent.
Yeah,
because that's just like, because it's not taken away from the character, but it is. It's like, well, that's the reason he's supposed to be here, is he's supposed to be like that. Holy shit. Like he just owns the space when he walks in, and like in awe. So that was such a one panel is all that was. But that kind of stood out to me a little bit, and I really dug that.
No, yeah, I focused in on that as well. And I like how you said that. I've never really thought about that. I mean, you read so much of a character, you watch so much of a character, you're gonna get, you're gonna get numb to it. But Batman his whole thing is intimidating people, and he's supernatural. What is he? So in one panel, you see Batman as he's perceived by everyone else, which really adds to the character. And I absolutely love that. And you bringing up the Batman as well, just Pattinson walking in that suit, he looks like a vampire or something. The way he moves, the way he looks, and everyone's just staring at him like, who the hell? What is this? Not just who is this? Like, what is this guy? And I think Matt Wagner, goddamn vigilante. Wagner just, I think we're going to talk so much about his art, which I do think is by far the best part about his work with Batman is how much he tells through the art, and specifically how he relays that Batman is viewed as this otherworldly thing. And this is very strange. This is strange. Like, it's not strange to us because we're so used to it that Batman and Gordon are working together. But it is very strange that Batman is in a morgue. This guy in a costume is in a morgue with this captain of the police force, which is pretty high up. And, this mortician could lose his job, and so many things could happen to him. And I don't think he thought that Batman was going to come in. I don't think Gordon relayed that information to him.
Yeah, I don't think he did either. Just by that panel alone. But you're right. We're used to this because we're readers of comics. But if you take a step back and as Eminem said, snap back to reality, and you think about it, it's like, that is weird. All of that is weird. A guy dressed up like this is weird. And so it's always great to get that perspective, the common folk, and then just getting the different perspectives, which Wagner does with everybody in this. It's bookended by, you see Julie Madison's reaction when she's there, like with Batman and stuff too. And I appreciate that with the story too. And it's not overdone, but we're just getting used to it, not used to it, intimidated by it, not intimidated, in awe, totally scared. Like, we're getting all those reactions to Batman. Now, we were focusing on the art. Do you get, and maybe I said this last time we talked, animated series vibe?
Absolutely.
Yeah, me too.
Absolutely.
I think he looks, I think these Wagner designs do have that Fleischer look to them, which obviously is what inspired Bruce Timm's look for the animated series. And then this being mature, but not like a good PG-13 comic, not rated R, but mature enough and accessible. So I think I always think that might have said it last time too. This feels that vibe to me of animated series.
Yeah, absolutely. And you say PG-13, I think it's borderline mature. It's pushing it. It's a lot darker than when I remembered it being. And I think just as a child, some things kind of just go over your head. But the amount of murder and bloodshed and bloodshed in this book is a lot. And if you're, a teenager, this is, standard issue for you. Like you've seen this before, especially nowadays. So, but it is a much darker story. It's definitely not just your run of the mill golden age, Bronze Age type of story, even though the artwork kind of would harken back to that. But I love the bat suit. I just love how simple everything is. Even Catwoman's costume at the beginning, which harkens to the Long Halloween. I just love the simplicity of Matt Wagner's art. He doesn't really try to overdo it. I think it's just the way he constructs things that really make it shine. Especially, I mean, you talk about that. We both talked about Batman standing in the shadow at the morgue. It's just little things like that, how he places characters and the way he's just he does such a good job of just setting the mood of the comic, and the way it all portrays out through the panels, I think is extraordinary.
And I think that very first page, the opening page, is a close-up shot of Catwoman. There's like the coloring with that is unique on its own. That I even really like that shot. It's just a close-up of her face. And that too is a blend of Year One, Long Halloween, because Catwoman's suit is gray in Year One, it's purple in Long Halloween, it's purple here. But but it's also not that big of a deal either. It's like, okay, all right. But then we do see this is a great continuation. Like, this could have been just a 12-issue series completely.
Absolutely, yeah.
Because it runs right into each other. There's a brief mention of the finale of Monster Men and a brief mention of Strange, and then they move on. And the first murder that occurs here, it's not like that's the first one of these. Then we do play catch up of we've closed the chapter on that big event out at the estate. But while that we were doing that, this has been brewing underneath and it's come to the surface of, look at these people's necks. They have puncture wounds, and Batman just, he's not dismissive of it in the morgue, but he's almost just like, okay, I'll keep my eye out. And then Gord's like, well, no, wait. And then he pulls out a second body, exact same thing. And it's like, okay, there's no coincidence now. It's not vampires. I don't care what 1939 said in Detective 31. This is not a vampire, but also explain 2 puncture wounds in the neck, and then like the throat, kind of, the gnarly result of that. And so we got a teeter, and I know the last one was Monster Men. They created monsters. So this teeters a little on extension of disbelief a little bit. But this guy is not, the monk himself, he's not supernatural. He thinks he is. And I guess there's some evidence there that you can believe, if you want to, that his antics are making him, he's lived decades and stuff as he's preaching that BS to the Brotherhood and his followers. But we get the real story of this is a descendant of a once insanely rich family in Gotham, and he's the only survivor, but he's reinvented himself.
Yeah, but it's never really explained, is it? It's never answered 100%.
No, that's only really nuggets are left for you to kind of choose what you want to believe. And I will lean towards reality more so. And like, yeah, this is just a manipulator freak, basically.
Yeah, I don't know. I want to lean more because it is, an interpretation of Batman versus the vampire.
Yeah.
And with the puncture wounds, and how was the blood perfectly all removed from the body of
true.
each victim. And then, they talk about how the son, what is it? The rail, what are they called?
The Ralstones.
Ralstones, sorry. He was away. He's the last descendant. He was away in Europe for a long, long, long time. And obviously his time there influenced him to take on this persona of the Mad Monk and be a vampire, or pretend to be a vampire. Yeah. We don't really learn what he was doing over there, which I know in the original story, Batman actually goes to Paris and all these different places.
Yeah. He's just like, I'm just going to go to Paris and I'm going to go to Hungary because that's just what I do. And Julie Madison, for some reason, is just going to all these places too.
Yeah.
Okay.
And he's fighting gorillas there, and he's fighting gorillas. That was when Batman was in New York City too, which is weird for me to
streets of New York.
Yeah, it's so strange.
Batman in the Big Apple.
Yeah. And but I mean, I don't know. I'm going to lean more toward the vampire thing because I think it's interesting, but more than likely it's probably not. But he's so strong too. Like, even when Batman's fighting him, he's like, Batman's talking about, oh, he's stronger than I think, and he's going to crush this shield within a second. Which, to get into the shield real quick, we'll talk about it later if we need to. That cover is amazing as well, with Batman holding that shield and the monk with the lightning in the background and swinging that flaming star is amazing. But I don't know. It's definitely, like you said, left open to interpretation whether you want to.
Well, there's hypnotism also,
the supernatural, or it's also, you're right.
So I mean that can like that supports your leaning towards a little more supernatural is like hypnotism, because like I've never been hypnotized. I don't believe it. So if you add that into it too, then I mean that supports that this is a little more supernatural. But I mean, I think I still lean it to he does some kind of trick. And I don't know. I guess that's just where I lean.
I think it's better to leave it open for interpretation on all of this. Even though, like, while reading it, I'm the whole time I'm like, how did he learn how to do this? How did he amass these followers? How did he do all of that? I don't think that's necessarily the point. The point he's there, and the thought of wondering where all this comes from is the point.
Since we're talking about this potential vampire, Batman does create batarangs made of silver.
He does,
because I mean, and that's great too. He does the work. He looks up stuff on vampires, and he does create the silver batarangs, in which that doesn't really work. So he kind of can scratch that off. But then you have the Mad Monk coming with, I mean, for a moment of time, I don't know when vampires, they decided let's make them sexy cool and take away the horror. But I love the gothic Dracula vampire, much more so. And I'm glad that's in which taking that from the original stories too. I'm glad that's the route Wagner took here. So the Ralstone estate is a big freaking castle. I love it. And then it's got the medieval stuff inside. It's got the Iron Maiden, which was I can only imagine you at 9 finding that both cool and terrifying.
Absolutely.
When you just see those eyes and the blood that's coming about it, and then the gushing of blood when that opens the door, also makes me think of Batman Returns. But I love that. And then they grab, like you said, Batman grabs the shield, and I don't know what that weapon's called, with like the spiked cannonball attached to the chain.
It's like a flailing star thing.
Okay. I love all that, and that's where. Oh, and then he sleeps in a coffin. Him and his right hand woman, Dala. Yeah. Sleep in coffins, in which her inner monologue, even I think she sounds like she struggles with that, but Nikolai, he just that's where he goes to bed.
Yeah, and I think you're kind of convincing me that it's not supernatural. The more
wasn't my intention. Wasn't my intention.
Is, with Dala's character, I think now, reflecting on it, is that she's kind of our way to learn that he targets these broken individuals, because it talks about. It's mentioned that she was a heroin addict. She moved to Gotham, had nothing there. And that's all of his victims as well, as people who were traveling to Gotham, had no ties. So, no one's going to go looking for him. Yeah. And her character and what we learn about her kind of reveals that, this is kind of all one ploy. And then the thugs also that are all there that are members of the cult who have nothing. They have absolutely nothing. So the monk offering them this eternal life, and you're going to be powerful, that's enticing to someone like that who has absolutely nothing. And I love in the finale where the Batmobile shows up, and Batman starts fighting him and uses gas, which Batman used gas in the original Detective Comics 31 as well. And it says that like half the thugs ran away. Half of them were like couldn't fight. Half of them ran away, and then a part of them just like instantly passed out with the gas. So It definitely shows, I think, now that I'm thinking about it, with all these characters, that this is just kind of one big game.
See, and so you could flip a little bit, and I'll be like, but he could be a vampire if you want him to be. We're flipping each other.
Explain all the blood gone, Ryan. Explain it.
There you go. Yeah, I can't. So he's a vampire.
Yeah, absolutely.
Continuation of last story is that they didn't close the book on, which I thought it was Matt Wagner. he could have just been done with Norman Madison and Maroni, because at the end of the last story, Batman has Maroni and he tells him, Norman Madison, he's square. All right, he's done. Whatever you think, whatever debt he owes you, like, it's done. And it scares him to where Maroni's like, okay, he's square. It's fine. And that book ends with Norman's just like paranoid and freaked out because of the end of the last story. So here there's a continuation of that, and it has, ripple effects in the story. And there's a tragedy with Norman Madison here too, which ultimately affects Julie Madison, which affects Bruce. So it's all connected. But Wagner does a really good job of organically like taking, okay, that's a subplot in itself as well, maybe a subplot, but he makes sure to, what do you want to say, leave nothing hanging with that either.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed taking these brief little detours from the main story of the Mad Monk and Batman and stuff and going to that route too, and seeing like it's something as much as Batman goes spying on Julie, basically sets her up as bait. And then
he's not the best boyfriend.
No, he's not the best. No. And then as he's leaving, it's like cut to Norman looking out the curtains and again paranoid and freaked out, like Batman's having the effect that he wants to have. It's just unfortunately it's on the wrong person. Absolutely. And that guy's spiraling out of control. And I loved following that thread throughout this too.
I love how the decisions of Batman affect Bruce Wayne in this book.
Yeah.
From the ending of, like you mentioned, when he threatens Maroni to clear the debt for Norman, which he thinks is, that's going to help me as Bruce Wayne as well. Julie's father is going to be worry free now. He's going to be happy. He's got nothing hanging over his head. All of that. When in reality, he becomes paranoid because he doesn't understand why would Maroni just let the debt go, and he himself can't let it go, and it starts driving him mad, affecting Julie. And that's, obviously that affects Julie. That also affects Julie, and that's why she finds counsel and therapy in the monk. It's all connected. It all ties.
It
together.
all is, yeah, exactly.
And I love how it ties in at the end where with her leaving. It's not just some happy ending and they get married and it's perfect. She says something pretty harsh in her letter to Bruce at the end, saying that Batman killed her father. She literally says that word for word. Batman killed my father. Which
ouch,
that hurt. That had to hurt Bruce hard. And he even mentions, I love how the book ends, but I love how he mentions, I'm never going to let any that happen again. I'm not going to let someone close like that. And not to just get to the end already, but I feel like I have to just say it now with the ending shot of the Flying Grayson's poster. I just think it's perfectly set up, and it's showing Batman is still continuing to learn and grow. Like he's not there yet.
It's almost like a Christopher Nolan approach of like the story continues on in your head.
Absolutely.
In this, but also you can go and read after this. Read The Man Who Laughs. Read The Long Halloween, read Dark Victory. Like you can continue the story if you want to. And nothing is going to be so negating of this portion of the story. Yeah. So it's really well done. And back to Julie, Julie Madison's always forgotten, which is always humorous to me, because she was his first love in comics. Like that was his first love was Julie Madison, and she's just kind of always forgotten. So I'm really glad that Wagner used her in this, and that he used her really well, where she is important to the story. I got so many, I don't remember if I said this is Monster Men, so many Andrea Beaumont vibes from her in this, especially I could just hear that every time she said daddy, like, because Andrea says it too. I can't help but say Andrea every time she said daddy, in the movie Mask of the Phantasm, and that's what I would hear here. But then also it is she's so close to her dad. Her dad is like scared and in debt to the mob, and then it's like, but Norman here is like frustrating too. It's almost like an annoying gnat, because Maroni is, he's too proud, has too big of an ego to explain that Batman scared the shit out of him to where all debts are cleared. He's got to play it up. And so then Norman's waiting for like, no, there's more to this. There's a catch. And he's like, I still owe you. And he's like, no, as far as I know, we're square. But then Norman, he can't let that go. And then his paranoia continues to be fed because he keeps seeing Batman around. So then let's bring in the big man, Falcone, who's then puts more fuel on the fire and telling Maroni of like, he owes me money and you're rejecting that. Like, no, get your money from Madison and blah, blah, whatever. So then Maroni, I don't feel bad for him because he's a bad dude, but it's like, oh, wow, that sucks. Because he's like, I can't go back to Norman Madison because Batman's watching, and Batman, I know what he can do to me. But then Falcone will do that to me also. So then he's stuck. And then the tragic ending of that is that Norman basically annoys himself into getting murdered. And then the reaction from Maroni, it's so perfect, of grabs this other woman in that parking garage, like, you saw that, right? Self-defense. It was self-defense. So he got rid of his problem with Norman Madison, but also it's like, it is tragic because the guy's not a bad guy. And then that's Julie's dad and all these things of connecting to the last story. And I'm just like, yeah, this subplot's kind of heavy.
It is.
It's great.
Absolutely is. Yeah.
Well done.
I really do. I mean, I wouldn't say I like Norman's character, but I like the way he goes into the story. It makes sense. It absolutely makes sense. Like, I mean, if you're in debt to the mob, why on earth would they ever say you're good? Don't worry about it.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if I was
be
in
a little
position,
suspicious.
I would be suspicious, but I'd be like, all right, if you say so. And I would try my best to move on. I think I'd be able to do it, especially if it's $3 million. But he's a proud man as well. I mean, there's a lot of egos in this book. Every character does.
Yeah.
A lot of crazy dreams as well. Did you notice that? Like Gordon had a nightmare, Norman had a nightmare, and Bruce had a nightmare as well, which I love that panel of his mother being Julie. I thought that was incredible. But to get back to Norman and his tragedy, he almost kind of commits suicide in a way. I think it
in a roundabout way. He brings it on himself.
Absolutely. He definitely can't shoot a gun to save his life. He had a free shot on Maroni. Yeah. He missed 3 times.
3 times. Shot right above his head.
Right above him. But
he's right there, man. Right there.
It is. I love how the situation Maroni finds himself in, because obviously we don't like him. I mean, we like his character. We don't like him as morally, but you kind of feel for the guy in a way. Like he's terrified of what Batman's going to do to him, but he's probably maybe even more terrified of what Falcone's going to do to him. Yeah. If he doesn't get that money back. And I was curious to see how Maroni was going to handle that. I think he lucked into Norman trying to kill him, and then that it being, it was self-defense. But
yeah,
I would be curious to see if Norman waited a little bit longer to do something, and how Maroni would have handled getting that money. Because he would have had to at some point, or that would have been his job or his life or something. I mean, especially when you deal with the Roman. And I love how brief I'm saying Falcone because of the Batman. Falcone is how I like to say
Either
it.
way. It's a Roz race thing now with Falcone.
It is. And
the Roman. That's our safe way. the Roman.
I love how brief he is. And I mean, a lot of characters are so brief, like we talked about at the beginning. I mean, Harvey Dent's brief, Catwoman's very brief.
Yeah.
And I like how the Roman just shows up in
3
Maroni's
scratches.
office. 3 scratches.
So a little continuity.
And just basically tells him to get his shit together and give me the money, or something's going to happen. And he just moves on. That's it. There's no big overarching. I mean, obviously there will be eventually, especially with Maroni and Harvey Dent. I think it's, it's so intentional and where that's going, but it's awesome, man. I love even the subplots have subplots in this book. Like they all these little seeds that you see being planted that lead to these, bigger Batman stories. And Matt Wagner I think he does a really good job, not only bridging year 1 to the Long Halloween, but bringing back stories, that original Batman stories, like Julie Madison, which we talked about a lot in the last episode of, all these characters kind of have synonymous love interest, and Batman does too, but he has so many. Like Batman is an absolute player. He has so many love interests. It's never just Lois Lane like Superman or Mary Jane like Spider-Man. It's all these other ones, and you would think that back then they kind of would have made her more of a staple.
Yeah.
But it's cool to see her back, and I'd love to see her back in other things as well. I know she doesn't have too many appearances in the modern day.
Yeah, I think like unfortunately she's always like forgotten because what was she? At least Vicky Vale was like, oh, she was a journalist, and then you get Talia. Talia was the daughter of a terrorist, and she ran a whole ninja organization basically and stuff. So you have those, but here I think so. What is she here also? I get that angle, but her character itself, though, you can see that she's smart. She puts things together. She's questioning things that should be questioned. The fact that she ends up in the end becomes, she's caught by the villain and Batman's got to save her. It's built up to where that's justified, though. It's not, we have to end this, damsel in distress and save me, Batman, or anything like that. It's a slow build of getting there where it crosses a bunch of checkpoints. It's definitely earned there as well. She does a stakeout outside of Wayne Manor because she's suspecting also of like things are not adding up because her bad boyfriend Bruce Wayne is feeding her lies and stuff and how he was going to have to leave. So she sits outside the gates. She's like, nobody's entered and nobody's left. And then she gets the shock of Batman revealing himself at the end. And I think it's a very realistic reaction.
It is.
It's an earned reaction. And then you see where she goes on to in the end and how she has to leave him. And I think that makes total sense.
Yeah.
So like, I don't know. I'm with you on in Scott Snyder's Zero year, there's very little of Julie Madison, but she doesn't stand out because yet again, they just didn't. And I'm not just like blaming this on them. It's just like they just didn't do a whole lot with her though. Again, so that's why she just doesn't fully stick because I don't think she gets a lot when she's used.
Yeah, I mean, she's going to school still in this, so she's a college student, grad student, doctor student. I can't remember what she was going for. I don't even know if they mentioned it or not in Monster Man. I can't remember, but she might need a little more to do, I guess, just with her role in Gotham, because she obviously has a role in the story with Bruce and her dad and all that. But maybe with Gotham that needs to be increased in a newer interpretation. But I like her take because it's very realistic.
Yeah.
It's not some fairy tale ending. I love how when she reacts to Bruce, she is shocked, which to us is like, how do you not put that together? You had a stakeout at his house. No one entered or left. Like, you could have put this together. He had 3 giant scratches on his chest, and it was from a rake that Bruce. Yeah. Bruce, that's a terrible lie. Are you kidding me?
I suspect he was lying that he fell on a rake, but I'm not sure exactly.
I'm not gonna lie, I laughed a little bit.
Okay,
I'm like, that is the worst lie ever. Come on, Bruce, you're better than that. And
all right.
And honestly, dude, did you realize that most of the story could have been avoided if she just had not terribly shitty friends?
Yeah.
They just wanted to talk about daddy's money and going on vacation or whatever, instead of just listening to their friend. If they just would have listened to her, it would have avoided everything.
Dalla could have said right there, hey, if you come listen to me, this is going to lead to you having your blood drained by a dude. Julie would have been like, better than hanging out with these two, let's party. Let's go.
They absolutely suck. And Bruce too is a terrible boyfriend. He's bad. He's absolutely bad, but he's
which maybe that's where he's learning. I mean, maybe that's a learning story too, he didn't have it figured out. I mean, maybe still to this day, whatever you read, he doesn't have it figured out how to be a good boyfriend.
No, I don't think that's one thing.
He's not a bad guy, but he doesn't have that.
He's really good at punching guys in the face and being a detective, but he's not the best at relationships.
Yeah.
At all.
His best relationship is with Catwoman, and that's a little messed up.
It's very messed up.
But Micah, do you have anything else we didn't touch on that you'd want to touch on here?
I think the only thing I really want to say in closing is I really enjoy the story. I really enjoy both of these as a whole. And I think the artwork is just so well done. I know we talked about it extensively at the beginning. We even mentioned it as we discussed the story. But I think the one thing that really draws me to these stories and makes me remember them is the artwork in the covers. And I would love to have Matt Wagner back in DC, hopefully. I know, like, with the whole leadership right now, apparently it's very toxic and some people are leaving and it probably is impossible to get him back. But I overall, with this story and this comic, the artwork is iconic to me. Maybe not, I wouldn't put this story up with, the best of the best Batman stories. But I would say the artwork is top tier. It's one of my favorite interpretations of the character for sure.
Yeah. This, we did a, episode 50, we did a top 10 Batman stories. This didn't make that, but both of these would make my top 20. I mean, I am a big fan of both of these stories. I don't have, with the show anyway, I never just like nitpick things. And I don't think if I tried that there would be much to nitpick with Darkman Rising, and specifically because this one we're talking about, Mad Monk. Which one? I'm gonna make it even worse for you here. Which one do you like more, Monster Men or Mad Monk?
Yeah,
Monster Men.
Yeah,
it's weird because I think I've always leaned to like the concept. I think I like Mad Monk more, but I think the story and how it played out and everything, I think I like Monster Men.
I agree.
Barely.
I would absolutely agree.
Small edge.
Yeah, I love the villain of the monk and his style and his look. Yeah. I think his costume is brilliant. But I do agree with you where I think the story is just a little bit deeper, maybe.
Yeah.
In Monster Men.
Yep.
And I like it just slightly more. I mean, honestly, dude, it's the same story. Like it really is. I mean, you can't really, I think it's impossible to read one without the other, especially Mad Monk without reading Monster Man. You're missing out on a lot of, story bits there, but
yeah,
they're definitely the same story. But if I had to pick one or the other, which I can't believe you asked that, how dare you?
I know. It's going to be a poll question. Man.
Also,
I think people should go to Twitter because I'm going to put that up as a poll question. Carry on.
Also, Matt Wagner signed Monster Man for me, so that's probably why.
Well, then there you go.
I'm gonna choose that one.
If I asked Jake, he'd be like, "It's Mad Monk, bro."
Yeah, we'll fight about it
because that's how he talks. Yeah, bro.
He does. Well, he's 22, and yeah, he does kind of.
Oh, okay, falling into the bro phase.
These Gen Zers.
Oh, geez. I gotta ask a few questions now. Last remaining questions. You know what's coming.
Yes, you've got a question?
What was your favorite part of Batman and the Mad Monk?
I think my favorite part, and I'm a big ending guy. I think I've kind of realized that in movies and in comic books as well, but I love the final panel where Batman talks about the war continues. I think that's what he says. The war continues. And it's him going off to deal with the Joker. And you have that poster of the Flying Graysons and Batman coming together and showing him growing. I've talked about, again, like Batman being a human and him learning lessons and growing. And so I think my favorite part about the Mad Monk is we see a Batman at the beginning who's different at the end. And it's leading into him becoming fully formed. So I would probably say that's my favorite part.
This was actually really tough for me to have an answer with that too. And I think I'm going to lean with you because it almost gave me a little bit of a vibe, and maybe it was inspired, I don't know, by Batman Begins. How that left you in a sense with like a what? And then it ended in like almost triumphant a little bit. Like on an upswing. No pun intended here. But it's kind of that way too. It's talking about basically, what it's saying, the Joker, and then you turn that page, and then there's he's flying away, the war continues, and then you have that Flying Graysons poster. It's just something about a massive moment in Batman's history. There it is. Like, I don't know, it all just flows well, and it really does. It just send you off on like this, like, oh, that's good. That's good. Which is so weird. It's not about the Mad Monk in any way or anything like that. It doesn't involve him, but I don't know. That's like, I'm with you on that. How about a favorite panel?
The covers count, I'm sure, or no?
I've picked covers in the past. So
I'm gonna have to
I
go
think
with
so.
the. Well, I'll go. We already know probably my favorite cover. We've already talked about it. The interpretation of cover from Detective Comics 31. But my second favorite is, it's so simple, but I adore it. I believe it's issue two's cover with Batman's hand just reaching up from the blood.
Yeah.
And something about that just, I mean, it's so moody. I mean, it's just Batman's hand reaching through blood. That's it. But I mean, that still is just, I can see it in my head right now of that look. And I just absolutely love it. I mean, he tells so much in his art with not even really doing that much, which obviously comes from someone who's incredibly talented. But what about you? Your favorite panel?
It would be so easy to just say the cover to issue 1.
Yeah.
And hey, that's the question. What's your favorite panel? Well, I'm going to bend the rules a little bit. I'm going to add another. So I'm going to choose that cover. But let's say that I can't choose the cover, then it's in issue 3 where we get that first setting of the castle,
Mm-hmm.
the Ralstone family estate.
Yeah.
I just think it looks great. It's got, like, for all the reasons I've already mentioned this too, of like, it's got gothic, atmospheric and stuff. I'm like, can't give me that. That's a Batman story. So I just love the look of that. And I think it's Julie's first. Yeah. Going there for the first time to meet Nikolai for the first time. Would you like to see this adapted in animation?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know you asked me that for,
of course,
the Monster Man, and obviously with Ego as well, which should be. I think, I mean, the 3 Egos got to be adapted, hopefully soon. But with these, I mean, I would like to ask you a question. Would you like to see these in 2 parts? Like,
yes,
almost kind of similar to the Long Halloween, or one? Well, you already answered it. So 2 parts.
I want to see. Yeah, I want them in 2 parts.
How long each do you think?
I think they can stick to their 75 minutes.
That's what I was thinking.
And I think marketing would call it something and say part 1 and part 2, because that just instantly with everybody, it's like, oh, okay, well, I have to commit to 2 parts then. But they could make it one big thing, split it up into 2 and not say parts, and let them stand on Batman and the Mad Monk, Batman and the Monster Man. Obviously have Monster Man first, and then they just play off of each other. I don't know how you make that connected, but hey, Batman Begins and The Dark Knight were connected. They had 2 completely different titles. So that would be my preference. And I think you can do each one at 75 minutes and not overstay its welcome and not have to really shred anything. And as much as I like both of these stories, I don't think you do one and not the other.
Absolutely.
In reality, I think you do them both. It's a package deal.
Yeah.
It's tricky as always, because we love this so much that then it's going to be highly criticized, anything that's different, but we already have this story perfected. So make it inspired by, much like Wagner took Batman versus the Vampire, inspired by that, but did his own thing with it and made it better. Like that's what I would hope, like, the mindset would be, and then make the animation. Like, I think I've repeated myself many times on here now of kind of saying, I do like animation, but every movie is the same style of animation. I would like them to be able to create their own look every movie. Yeah. Instead of it being, it's a continuation, because look, it looks the same as the last movie and the one before that. I would like it if they could do something unique and different with this too. Really get like seeped into that gothic atmosphere for it. That's what I'd say. And anybody that would listen to this that is in charge of making that happen, be like, yeah, that's a lot of money. That's not happening. But
I think it would be in. I mean, what you were talking about sounds a lot like the Long Halloween adaptation.
Oh, what?
I mean, it's a different animation style than what we saw with Tim Sale, but it's still unique and different. It is kind of similar to most things, but I think it is pretty unique in that film. and how they take the story in different twists and turns. It's meant to, I think it's meant to be watched by people who read the graphic novel, but it also can be enjoyed by someone who hasn't seen it, because you're still going to be surprised either way.
Yeah.
And with regards to Dark Moon Rising, I think this would be easily adapted animation wise. I mean, we talked about how it looks like the animated series, so something along that realm perhaps, would look good. And I think you would just call it Batman Dark Moon Rising Part 1.
There you go.
Batman Dark Moon Rising Part 2. And maybe even if you want, you can add a colon and be like Monster Man, and this one's Mad Monk. But I think even just calling it Dark Moon Rising Part 1 and Part 2 is more than enough.
There we go.
And it would fit perfectly. They just did Long Halloween, so it's, in order, like a prequel to that. So
get Tim Sheridan on it.
Get Tim Sheridan on it. What's he doing? Dark Victory. Come on now.
He has said, if people want Dark Victory, buy the Long Halloween, because that's how you can show that you want Dark Victory. So I hope enough people bought the Long Halloween animated movies. But also, Warner Brothers, Micah and I just did like 20% of the thinking
we did
of making this happen. So you're welcome. It's a gift. Make it happen. Well, Micah, this was a joy, as expected and as always. So thanks, obviously, for coming back. Can't wait until you return in 2024.
Hopefully sooner.
Yeah. Why don't you go ahead and plug away anything and everything that you'd like to?
Roger that. Well, first and foremost, it was an honor having me on here. It always is. I love the Batman Book Club. So being able to contribute, even in just a small amounts that I do, means a lot. So I'm really appreciative of letting me on the show. But
of course,
yeah, you can have a YouTube channel. It's called Ramey Review. I haven't posted there in a while. I've been very busy with my schedule. As I mentioned earlier on, but we're gonna be getting back into that here sometime soon. So if you want to, for some reason, listen to more of me, you can go do that. I'm also a BOF contributor, so you'll hear me on the BOF podcast or the Social Hour from here and then. So yeah.
You had me on Ramey Reviews for the Batman Junior novel.
We did. Right? How weird is that? I had you on.
I know.
To talk about a Batman story.
It was fun. It was good. Yeah.
It was
good. I was thinking about that. I'm like, I think that was the only one. Not a complaint or anything. It was just me like, I'm not forgetting about another time. Was it? I think it was just the Junior novel is what we did.
Yeah.
Right.
The Batman.
Yeah.
What was that called?
The Batman, the Junior novel.
I think that's it, right?
Actually, I don't know.
I don't remember. It was good.
Yeah, it was fun. As for the Batman Book Club, follow it on Twitter and Instagram at the Batman BC. It's also on Threads, but haven't really figured out what Threads is supposed to be, so I'm not really going to push that as much. But go to Twitter at the Batman BC, because there will be a poll question up here, which is what I asked Micah of Monster Men or Mad Monk. And it's always fun the more people who participate, because it's a good discussion and good comments. So go there for that. Also, make sure to subscribe, if you haven't already, to the Batman Book Club YouTube channel, where Peter and I keep talking about how we're going to dive into No Man's Land. We haven't yet, but we're going to make it a goal this month. We're going to hop into that, and you can check our 8 parts on the Road to No Man's Land omnibus. If you want to support the show, there's a variety of ways you can do that. Number one, like I said at the top, patreon.com/thebatmanbc, where I'm going to be adding some extra stuff to that here this month. So go ahead and check that out and join the other nice people who have joined Patreon. You can also go to tpublic.com, type in TBBC for the Batman Book Club, and you can get some cool items that have this great logo created by the talented Justin Kowalski, slapped on some notebooks, t-shirts, hoodies, onesies for your loved one, whatever you'd like. But if you want to support the show and you don't want to spend any money at all, that's 100% a-okay. The easiest, quickest, and most impactful thing you can do is rate and review the show. So whichever podcast provider you use, Apple, Spotify, Amazon, iHeartRadio, Google Play, wherever, just go to the rate and review page and rate and review the show, because the more reviews the Batman Book Club gets, the more it helps spread the word about the Batman Book Club. And as we all know, the word is panic. So for Mr. Ramey Review, Micah Ramey, I am Ryan Lauer. And until next time, read more Batman comics.